we are at a moment of extraordinary peril. The fact that the Doomsday clock was moved 10 seconds closer to midnight is a mark of our peril because that clock is managed by world experts who are sound judges of where we stand. And we are at the brink of a disaster. The disaster is because our global politics is failing miserably, first and foremost with the United States, which is a major provocateur of this war and a major threat to the peace, to be blunt. We need a different foreign policy in the United States. Of course, we need a different foreign policy in Russia and Ukraine and of the major powers. And this has to be a foreign policy to get us off this reckless war between Russia and NATO, which is escalating by the day, because the Doomsday clock moved 10 seconds closer to midnight at the same time that the United States and Germany agreed to send new, highly advanced tanks to Ukraine in a guaranteed reckless escalation that brings us closer to nuclear war. And the belligerents in this, which start with Russia and the United States, are not even talking right now with each other, which is an absolute disgrace. It's worse than 5-year-old children. The idea that you don't even have a discussion between President Biden and President Putin for more than a year, just public posturing, reckless statements about each other, without even a phone call. It's worse than 5-year-olds. And I give a huge amount of responsibility for this horrible situation to the US government over many years. The reason is this conflict goes back actually more than 30 years to 1990, when President Gorbachev, who I had the honor to help support as an economic advisor to his economic team, unilaterally disbanded the Warsaw Pact military alliance of the Soviet Union. Unilaterally. And when he did it, he received solemn assurances by Germany and the United States that NATO would not fill the vacuum with US-led military bases and alliances. And the United States lied. Not for the first time, by the way. Because as soon as the military alliance of the Soviet Union was disbanded, the neoconservatives in the United States, that is the military-industrial complex and its supporters, began to plot the eastward movement of NATO. And this started already in 1992. And then in the mid-1990s, after President Clinton had told further lies to President Yeltsin, who I also had the honor to help advise, NATO began its enlargement. First to 3 Central European countries, Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, which became Czech Republic, and Slovakia. And from then on, the United States has been pursuing its unipolar agenda of moving American bases, weaponry, missile systems, ABM systems further eastward, with the idea in part of surrounding Russia. And this was laid out by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997 in his book, The Global Chessboard, where he talked about the geographical pivots especially the role of Ukraine, as absolutely central stakes in the battle for hegemony between the US and Russia. In 2004, NATO expanded to 7 more countries, including the Baltic states, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovenia, and Slovakia. And then in 2008, George Bush Jr. insisted that NATO would move to Ukraine and to Georgia. And President Putin at the time and in the year before had made absolutely clear that is the ultimate red line for us. And it was in this context also we should recall that the United States had unilaterally abandoned the ABM treaty and started placing missiles in Eastern Europe. And so in 2008, President Putin already told Bush that this was leading to conflict and that Russia would take Crimea if the US persisted in its move. Then please understand that in 2010, 11, 12, 13, Ukraine tried to walk a delicate balancing act between the United States pressures and Russia. President Yanukovych called for neutrality, which is what he understood rightly to be necessary to save Ukraine from the disaster that it's in right now. The United States could not abide by neutrality. And so the United States contributed to the violent overthrow of Yanukovych in February 2014. We say it's the Maidan Revolution, a spontaneous uprising, but the United States at the most senior levels was involved in that, quote, spontaneous uprising, including the then Assistant Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, who is now the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, and who has been involved in manipulating Ukraine's politics for a decade. She is the inside neocon in the State Department. So this war started, by the way, February 2014, not February 2022. It's a lie that it started February 2022. It started with the overthrow of a government trying to maintain neutrality. And the United States helped put in power extreme nationalists in Ukraine who broke the neutrality policy, demanded NATO membership as soon as possible, and welcomed billions of dollars of arms shipments from the United States starting in 2014. So this war going into its 9th year